Hey everybody, good morning from tropical paradise. Listen, this needs to be said again. People who like socialism, who think it's good, why do you even talk? Because we already know exactly what you're going to say. Response is very predictable. Literally two things that they say. First thing, call a bunch of countries in Northern Europe that aren't socialist and say they're great examples of socialism. Listen, if you think there's a single socialist country in Northern Europe, you're stupid. You're an uneducated American. Second thing they do is make excuses for all the countries that actually are socialist, make excuses for their horrible failures. Or they lie about it, right? So, for example, Venezuela. First of all, many of them aren't aware of how terribly bad the situation is there. There's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Venezuelan refugees leaving the country, hundreds of thousands. I don't remember the exact number. It's some massively astronomical number that have left the country in the last few years. And they blame it on U.S. sanctions, embargoes. If only the U.S. hadn't put those gosh darn embargoes, the country would be great. No, before socialism, Venezuela was the richest country in South America. Now it's the poorest. That happened in about 3.5 decades. Geez, I just heard a tree fell down. All right. Anyways, so before socialism, Venezuela was wealthy. Everyone was doing very well. After socialism, people are going out into the middle of fields, slaughtering cows and taking the meat. People are robbing food delivery trucks. The ruling party is offering boxes of free government food to people if they agree to vote for their party in the election, right? That didn't happen because of the U.S. sanctions that were put into place like 2 years ago. The vast majority of the sanctions placed on Venezuela were very, very recent. The country has been collapsing for 25 years. Anybody who tells you that the collapse in Venezuela is due to U.S. embargo is stupid. It's a very stupid person. You should not even be talking to them, right? These people are stupid. Now, I also mentioned lying, so they'll totally lie or forget about the horrible human rights abuses in Cuba. And then they'll say, oh, and did you know that Cuba, a socialist country, has one of the best medical systems in the entire world? No. Remember, these are very stupid people. They don't know anything. Cuba has very good medical universities. That's why they export very good doctors to the rest of the world, who, by the way, are very happy to leave Cuba. That's about it. The thing is, Cuba has two medical systems. There's the nice one. There's a two-tier system. There's a really good medical system for tourists and rich people. All right, and then there's the shitty one that everyone else gets, right? It's like that in most countries that have government paying for the healthcare. Foreigners that have visited Cuba and experienced their amazing medical system for medical tourism don't often realize, because they don't actually visit the ghettos and the slums and see what hospitals those people have to go to. So Cuba does not have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Cuba has a shitty healthcare system. It's just masked by the fact that they have two healthcare systems, one for the rich, one for the poor. Doesn't sound very much like socialism, eh? Anyways, so these behaviors, right? So they're going to, number one, they're going to point to countries in Europe that aren't socialist and call them socialist. And number two, they're going to make excuses for countries that have collapsed and blame it on everything except socialism. Number three, they're just going to outright lie. So after they mentioned that they think that Cuba has the best medical system and one of the best medical systems in the world, they'll also just totally not even mention any of the horrible human rights abuses. Just like in Venezuela, they won't mention any of the human rights abuses. They'll just point to the United States embargo as the reason for everything going wrong there. Now, about that whole pointing to European socialist countries, if they were actually socialist, have you ever actually met a Danish person? Talk about racial stereotypes being true. The prevailing racial stereotype for Danish people is they all wear the same clothes, have the same haircut, act the same way. They're very ideologically and behaviorally homogenous. They generally don't have alternative political opinions. They love and trust their government, right? And almost all Danish people that I've met have been this way. Most people in the United States have never met a Danish person, so it's very easy for them to point to Denmark as the epitome of what we want. Do you really? That's Brave New World. That's not a free society. Do you really want your country to be a society of worker bees? That's just a funny little quirk of Denmark. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying anything bad about Danish people. And I have met a few independent, free-thinking Danish people, but very few. That's not, even if Denmark were a socialist country, that's not an example of society, of a society we want to be like. Now, they're actually not. Now, some of these countries in Europe that are called socialist, people believe that they like tax the rich and use that money to pay for stuff for the poor. They don't. Actually, I think it was Denmark, but there's a couple other supposedly socialist European countries where their capital gains tax was actually lower than Trump's capital gain tax, even after the Trump tax cut, which they complained about horribly as benefiting the rich. Even after the Trump tax cut, these supposedly socialist countries, at least one or two of them, had a lower capital gains tax rate, which is crazy. And then if you look at the middle class, even the lower middle class being taxed at 40 to 60% of their earned income, which is crazy. And people will tell you that's fine because they get everything paid for. They get the free healthcare and this and that. No, healthcare should not cost that much. Anybody who thinks healthcare should cost that much that they can take 40 to 60% of your income to pay for it is stupid. You should not be talking to those people. All right, end of rant. I hope everyone has a great day. Remember, don't talk to stupid people. Honestly, I already know what you're going to say. Don't even bother talking. You're going to say that Venezuela collapsed because of the U.S. sanctions. You're going to say Cuba has the best medical system in the world. And you're going to name a bunch of countries in Europe as being great examples of socialism that aren't socialist. You're just going to lie and say a bunch of things that have no basis in fact or truth. Very predictable. If I can predict exactly what you're going to say before you even say it, don't bother talking.